Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We are back talking about football today. NFL Combines coming up this week, Tyson. We got a ton of news happening on that front with one of the top prospects that we'll dive into. And then we're going to start our first edition of a new series that we're calling the Draft Dive. We're going to take a look at each of the teams, kind of talk about their needs, who they should draft prospect-wise, what we think they should do this offseason. So we're excited to get that rolling. Tyson, how you doing today, brother?
So far, so good, man. I mean, I'm excited to get into this. This draft season is one of my favorite things because it's just so ridiculous. And unfortunately, we got off to a pretty crappy start with the Jalen Carter news, but we'll get into that a little bit more. But basically, we're going to try to go 4 teams a week, and we've for the first time ever maybe planned something out so it'll end right before the draft. And like you said, the combine started yesterday. Drills officially start tomorrow. I think quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs are Saturday, Sunday this year. So make people wait a little bit, but it's the underwear Olympics, dude. Like we get to watch all these dudes. My favorite part of combine season, I know this is a little bit of an aside, but it's like we double count so many things. Like when Devon A-Chain shows up and runs a 4.2, he's going to get pushed up people's like mock draft boards, even though we already knew that he was like Olympic level speed. Or Jalen Hyatt to run a 4.29, and people will go, wow, he's really fast, as if the tape didn't tell us that he was fast
Right.
the entire time.
I'm interested since we have defensive line and linebackers starting tomorrow and doing drills. So we're recording Wednesday. So officially drills start on Thursday, and it's the linebackers at the ends. I'm curious to see how some of these guys run. Like I'm more interested in the big guys running than the wide receivers and the running backs. Because like you said, Tyson, we know they're fast. Like we've gotten numbers on these guys since they've been coming out of high school. I want to see these guys who are the big, the big rangy, um, people who need to play in space in today's NFL. I want to see if they can actually run because that's what you need more than anything. And we see how linebackers, how the positions changed. And you can't be a great team, I think, without some of these rangy linebackers. So I want to see the next crop come through.
And on that note, I mean, if you're listening to this and the combine's going on, if you're listening to this tomorrow as we record, Drew Sanders is probably going to be the first linebacker off the board from Arkansas. But if he shows up and he runs well and tests well, then all of a sudden he's like a mid to high second round pick. And like those are the guys that you see make themselves a couple $100,000 or $1 million over the course of a week. But Brad, we got to talk about a guy that might have lost himself a couple $1 million.
Yeah, so let's talk about Jalen Carter. First of all, he's an absolute stud out of Georgia. They're discussing him as a generational prospect. I mean, somebody kind of like an Aaron Donald who can disrupt
He's skinny
the game
Fletcher
from
Cox.
the interior. Skinny Fletcher Cox. I think that's a great comparison. Somebody who's mobile, kind of a newer defensive lineman who can chase down running backs from around the edge if he gets out in space. For those of you who may not have heard, Jalen Carter has now been charged officially with reckless driving, first and foremost, in an incident that resulted in 2 deaths, one of his teammate, one of the team manager at Georgia after the national championship game. Tyson, you've been digging into this a little bit more than I have, so why don't you share a little bit more for the listeners?
Well, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's just like, the timing it really sucks for Jalen Carter, and we don't want to get it lost here that like people lost their lives, and that's way crappier than Jalen Carter losing a couple spots here in the draft. But like his story changed a handful of times. Looks like it's going to be misdemeanors, and he'll probably end up skating scot free because he's about to come into generational wealth, and that kind of helps you get out of situations like this. There's no video as far as we know, and unfortunately, the truth is like if there's video, then the punishment is worse, and that's just the way that it is. But he fled the scene, so you can't prove that he was drinking or anything like that. Happened the night of the national championship game, which is pretty crazy that it was suppressed until 30 minutes before he was supposed to go on the press conference stage at the combine. Seems a little iffy to me there. It's a little interesting for the timing. But all in all, man, I mean, this is the guy that has been consistently mocked at number one. Him and Will Anderson at the beginning of last year, and then Jalen Carter has just kind of solidified that spot as the best prospect in this class. The ugly truth of it, Brad, is somebody's going to get a discount on probably the best player. It's just the cost that it comes at kind of sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to mention the names Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix, who was a recruiting staffer, and Devin Willock was one of the teammates, offensive linemen for Georgia. So just did want to mention their names as well, the two who lost their lives in this unfortunate incident. Before we dive into our draft dive, I'm not sure if Jalen Carter is going to fall that much, Tyson. And you want to talk about the ugly truth? The dude's a generational talent. If it's a misdemeanor, if it's nothing like too serious, because we don't want to speculate. Like, we're not here to speculate on what those charges may be. All we know is what we're going to do is react, because we're not legal scholars. We're going to react to what's coming down. I will predict, though, I think if it's nothing too serious, if he's not officially charged with murder or manslaughter or anything like that, I don't know if he falls out of the top 5. Quite
so
honestly.
Crazy that we've come this far from Laramie Tunsil's stepdad leaking a video of him smoking some weed that dropped him 10 spots down draft boards to this, where it's like, oh man, I don't know. I mean, is it really that bad? And people say the NFL this, the NFL that. It's been 15 years or 10 years now since Dante Stallworth killed somebody in a car, and he was back a year later. Like, this is what's always happened. So don't act surprised that it's happening now. It's just pretty crappy way to introduce yourself to the world.
Yeah, 100%. And now, to be fair to Jalen Carter, his representatives have said, they're making arrangements to have himself be turned in. And then Carter himself said in a statement that he expects to be, quote, fully exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing, end quote. So just a storyline that we have to follow, a storyline that we're going to be paying attention to. And clearly that evaluators and decision makers at the NFL are going to be paying attention to and monitoring as we get more information on how the police are going to continue these charges towards Carter, or if any deal can be made, or if there's any deal to be made at all on the front, or if it needs to progress to a grand jury or anything along those lines. So convoluted situation there off the field. Let's get into the draft dive here, Tyson. Our first 4 teams as we get through 1 through 4. And it's interesting that it lined up this way, because we're starting with the Chicago Bears, who, like you said, if they didn't trade this pick, the number 1 overall pick, that they probably are taking Jalen Carter. So what do the Bears do now? Does anything change on their draft board? Just a couple of things to keep in mind as we go through this offseason and draft season. The Bears have the most cap space available with $98 million projected. They're going to have a ton of money to spend, an absolute ton of money. Head coach Matt Eberflus now in his second year. Justin Fields, their current quarterback. There was questions floated around if they would trade Fields and draft a quarterback at 1. Seems like Ryan Poles, the general manager, has decided that he's going to stick with Fields and see if they can shop this pick. Because right now they currently have draft picks 1 and 56 in the early rounds. Team needs wide receiver. We know that. Offensive line, we know that. Traded Roquan Smith last year, and they need a linebacker, so that's a point that they need to improve. And then an edge rusher, that's something that I added as well. They just can't rush the passer right now. And a notable free agent for the Chicago Bears, David Montgomery, their running back. So let's dive in here, Tyson. I mean, obviously the question mark is about the number 1 pick. I expect them to trade it. Do you?
Of course. I mean, if you don't, that's like a war crime as far as being an NFL general manager goes. Like, if you know for sure that Houston needs a quarterback, Indianapolis needs a quarterback. I mean, they're uniquely lucky in that scenario this year that 2 of the most quarterback hungry teams, who, by the way, went out and got new coaches who are going to want to get their guy, happen to be within the top 4. So you're within that tier essentially of the top prospects. You're almost ensuring yourself one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter if you don't move past 4. If I'm the Bears, obviously I want to trade down twice. Like that's what I want to do. I want to go to 2, and then I want to go to 4, and then see what's going on as far as that goes. But they needed so much help, Brad, that it's kind of a double-edged sword here, because from 2 to 1, like if that's the trade that happens, you're not going to pick up an extra first-round pick. You're not getting the 12th pick in the draft. I don't care what people are reporting or Bears fans want to believe. That's not going to be on the table. Check out the Trubisky trade from a couple years ago, and you're going to get something much more similar to that. And then from 2 to 4, you might not pick up a future first there either, which would be a bummer if you're the Bears. But this draft class is stacked with skill position players, particularly running back, and it's a better quarterback class than a year ago. I think Jake Haener, honestly, would have showed up at the combine a year ago, and people would have been like, I don't know, is he as good as Kenny Pickett? Because that's the quarterback last year. It was like we didn't know if anybody was going in the first round. And then next year, I think with some of the young guys in college, Caleb Williams, namely, give Fields another year. You got to evaluate. I'm not the biggest believer in Justin Fields. I don't think either one of us are. There were some areas that he definitely grew in this year, but again, it's hard to evaluate a guy when you get 3 weeks of Darnell Mooney, and then you get Cole Kmet. Khalil Herbert, to me, is one of the more overrated running backs in the NFL. I think because we only get to see him in limited quantities, people are kind of anointing him as like a sure thing, even though we don't know if he can be a bell cow. All I'm saying is that they were so devoid of talent, it's really hard to pass judgment on Justin Fields. I think you get him as much help on both sides of the football as you can. You evaluate over the next year. And if he's as bad as he looked for parts of the season, you're picking in the top 3 again. And if he's good, all of a sudden, like the NFC North is on its head. And you have a chance to push the Detroit Lions somehow for that second playoff team from that conference or division.
Chicago Bears, to close the season, lost, 14, 15 games in a row? 14 for sure. Maybe 13 games in a row. I forget what exactly it was. They finished 3-14. And like you said, there was not a lot around Justin Fields. Now, they have a ton of cap space this offseason. Like, they can go get players. They don't have to rely on the draft. Because I honestly think if they didn't have this cap space, they had a ton of dead money, and they were like a middling team. The first and 56 pick is just not good enough to flip this roster early. And this is a good draft. So they need to get assets. Like, they have to trade this pick. There's no excuse not to. You have to get the deal done. I don't care if you're arguing over, oh, wait, we want a 3rd-round pick and you want to give us a 4th. You have to fucking take what you get because this roster needs to be rebuilt. The offensive line's terrible. We know that. I think you're right at that point where we're not fairly able to evaluate Justin Fields with a below-average receiving core and a very, very bottom 5 offensive line unit. So I'm not the biggest believer either. Like, me personally, I agree. If Fields can't take the next step forward, I think you really have to evaluate if they're going to take a quarterback in next year's draft and maybe go up and get him. But at that point, who wants Justin Fields if you offload him? So there's a whole convoluted question there. Focusing on what the Bears should do this year, I completely agree. You got to go young, I think, if you're Chicago. Get a couple players that you know can play for that defense. That's what I personally think they should do, is spend a lot of that cap money on the defensive side of the ball. Let Matt Eberflus use his defensive mindset and defensive abilities on their own defense, and then just draft young on the offensive side through the draft and build with Fields if you firmly believe that he's your franchise.
Nobody else seems to remember that Matt Eberflus essentially opened one of his press conferences a year ago saying that my defense goes as a dominant 3 technique goes. And they just so happen to be in the driver's seat for, the best defensive tackle we've seen come out of the draft in quite some time. The news on Jalen Carter stinks, but I think if you're a Bears fan right now and you're like, well, that's fine, we'll still take Will Anderson. I don't think you will. I think that Jalen Carter is going to be a Chicago Bear, and that's why I think you can't afford to move past 4. In all honesty, I think the Jalen Carter news hurt the Arizona Cardinals as much as it hurt the Chicago Bears, because they're sitting there at 3. They have their quarterback already. They could use an influx of talent. They could certainly use a facelift. And I don't know if a lot of the teams that were going to be there willing to take that risk are still going to want to take it after today and with the backlash that'll come.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, how ruthless does Ryan Poles in Chicago want to be? I mean, that's the question. Like, are they immune to that? Is the talent just so much weighs the issues off the field that they're like, hey, this is our guy going forward? Anything else in Chicago, or we want to move to Houston?
I think David Montgomery's gone. This 2023 rookie running back class it's so juiced, man. It's crazy. And then the free agency class is massive as well. I think David Montgomery has a pretty good shot to land in a better situation for him going forward. I don't necessarily know where that will be, but I think he's done playing in Chicago. And honestly, man, with $98 million in cap space, I think it'd be malpractice for the Bears to not at least throw massive offer sheets. Like, if the Jaguars fucked up last offseason by signing Christian Kirk, the Bears need to do the same.
And they didn't even fuck up, because when you look at it, Christian Kirk had a great year and Trevor Lawrence took a step forward.
I
So
just mean as
I
far
love
as
how
the
people
way everyone else was
criticize it.
paying people.
Right.
Because then it was like, well, Christian Kirk's $72 million guy. We got a Tyreek's all of a sudden 30, which probably led to a lot of the offseason movement that we saw from receivers. But like the Bears need to front load something and they need to put a giant number in front of one of these marquee guys. And to me, I truly I think that's going to happen.
Okay, let's go to Houston. So they have the second overall pick, $36.3 million in cap space. Now that's fifth most that they have available that they can play with this offseason. You would expect some of the veteran guys to be off their books as well. That hasn't come through yet, but we will see. Now, they hired D'Amico Ryans. He's going to be in his first year, the defensive coordinator coming over from the San Francisco 49ers. QB, I have a question mark. Clearly, they need one. That's a huge team need. Davis Mills didn't work out there. I don't know. I don't think they're going to go veteran. It seems crazy for me. It's crazy to me that they would do that. Their draft picks, what they have in the early rounds, second overall, 12th overall that Tyson mentioned. They also have acquired in that Deshaun Watson trade. They also have the 34th pick and the 66th pick. So the Houston Texans are draft rich early on in this year's draft. I mentioned they need a quarterback. They also, I think, my opinion, they need an offensive line. I know Tunsil's the left tackle there, but everything else, not great. And I think they need some more edge rushers on defense, man. Like they have to get after the quarterback. That's something they've been lacking. And then you look at some of their notable free agents, edge rusher Obo Okoronkwo. He's a free agent. I think he's going to get paid by somebody. If it's not the Texans or if they don't franchise him, I honestly think this is who they're going to franchise. Jonathan Owens, the safety. I think now new husband of Simone Biles. I think they are officially married. I'm not sure yet though. And then Jordan Akins, tight end, starter, backup. That's somebody notable for them as well. I know they traded for O.J. Howard or signed him. I think they signed him right after he got cut from the Bills. Started off good, fell out of favor there. This is a complete rebuild, though, for the Texans. Like they got their coach that they wanted. Their goal is to get their quarterback in the draft and just say, hey, let's start building this baby up.
To me, first of all, Houston it's kind of flying under the radar still, and I don't know if anybody's ever going to bring it up again, but the fact that they went out and won the game to move to 2 instead of 1 and are now in talks, are rumored to be in talks to move up to 1, it is an all-time blunder. Like truly, it really is. And that's why they're sitting here as bad as they are. And there was obviously existential circumstances that worked against them with the Deshaun Watson stuff. But to me, it's got to be quarterback. I think ideally, and we don't know these players and we're not in the interview room, so maybe we're completely off base, but like to me, Bryce Young seems like the guy if there's going to be somebody to lift an organization out of the gutter immediately. So I think you got to love Bryce Young here if you're Houston. I don't know if he'll still be on the board. Probably not. But then I think you got to get him a toy at 12. And I know that the defense is devoid in talent and all that stuff, but if I'm D'Amico Ryans and I have a 5-year contract and I believe that I'm the best defensive coach in the NFL, like Nico Collins can't be my wideout one going into next year with Bryce Young. It just can't be. Like if I'm Houston, I'm either at 12, I'm looking at Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston or Jackson Smith and Jigba, although I really doubt he goes that high. Somebody to play wide receiver for us because Brandon Cooks has been wanting out very actively. And I think they're a prime trade candidate to move down at 12, but they're a prime one to move up at 1. And if I'm Houston, ideally you would like to move down from 12 first. You would like to do that quickly. So then you can take some of that ammo to go from 2 to 1. And the pill isn't as tough to swallow as far as going for 2 and screwing the entire organization.
Do you think they actually trade up to 1? I don't think
no,
that
they can't.
They can't, right? So I think they sit firmly at 2. Like I don't like what's the point in them flipping up there? Because okay, so let's say this. Nobody finds a trade partner with the Bears. I think that'd be shocking to me, but let's say Bears aren't impressed with any of the offers. Let's just take our guy at 1 and we'll figure it out from there. If you're the Texans, that's the best case scenario for you. And okay, so let's say the Colts go up and get 1. Okay, so now you're still sitting at 2. The Colts take the quarterback they want, and then you have the pick of the litter with the other 3, whether it's Levis, Young, Stroud, or Anthony Richardson. Like it would be an all-time blunder for them to trade up to 1 and flop with the Bears. Like the Bears, number one, the Bears have to get out of position. If not, that's horrible. If the Texans trade up to 1, that's even worse in my opinion.
Oh, it's bad. It's so bad. And the only downside to that is Indianapolis is in division. And so if you know that you love Bryce Young or you love CJ Stroud, and I will say, I think Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are going to put on a show this week at the Combine. I don't think that their career ends the same way in Houston as it would if they were taken by somebody with a more competent front office and without a track record of ruining people, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Although those don't really exist at the bottom of the draft. Like, they have to get this right, and I don't know if they can afford a project because if you take a project quarterback like an Anthony Richardson or to a lesser extent a Will Levis, I think the community is pretty split on as far as how pro ready he is. But like, if that guy doesn't work right away, then you're in the same spot as the Bears are this year, except for it's a legitimate question. Except for then it's like, okay, well, you have to take Caleb Williams, and you just had a guy put crap on film for a year. So to me, like, Houston has to be really smart with this, but they have the luxury of a really bright young coach and tons of draft capital, which is something that the Bears. Eberflus is a great coach, but I don't know if he's great, but he's been around, right? DeMeco Ryans, it's like the fresh face on the block. Everybody's going to be excited. There's juice in the building, and you have that draft capital then to take defensive players if you want at 12, if you want at 34, and kind of beef up that way. But you have to walk out of here with the QB, man. You just can't not.
Yeah, you got to get a quarterback if you're the Texans, and after that, I agree. You got to get some weapons for your young quarterback because that's the fastest way. And I don't know, honestly, if they don't trade from 12, and I agree, they should get as much draft capital as possible. I don't know if I'd take Quentin Johnson at 12. That seems like a reach to me.
I'm going on record right now. I don't think Quentin Johnson's going to be a good pro.
It seems a little slow. Did not look good in that Georgia game when you actually had legit pros guarding him.
So on the one hand, right? Last year everybody hated Drake London for some reason. All of a sudden before the draft, Drake London couldn't separate,
Right.
which like wasn't the
Right.
knock at all when he was in college. But how do you hate Drake London? And then all these same people love Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston, he's more athletic, but he's a worse football player. And like yak yards don't impress me in the Big 12. I don't care what Marvin Mims did after the catch, and he was much better after the catch than Quentin Johnston as far as tape goes. And like a project receiver from TCU, dude, we have tons of data that this doesn't work. Lucky for him, he is the only one with, like, when you look at that dude, you think number one NFL wide receiver. I don't think you get that same vibe when you look at Jordan Addison. When you look at who else? Jackson Smith and Jigba. When you look at Josh Downs, Zay Flowers.
Right.
Zay Flowers kind of looks like one though.
Zay Flowers looks like a one. He's the only one other guy I said, he might be the one because Smith and Jigba, he's a slot guy, man. Like he's a slot guy. Apparently that's how the teams view him. And then Addison, he's kind of a tweener, right? Like he's super fast, but I don't really think he can be your number one. Maybe just kind of that burner guy, but maybe in the slot. I don't know if he's sharp enough at route. We'll see. I mean, that's something we'll get into as we get more film on that. But did want to mention too, John Mechie, the draft pick for the Texans last year, was diagnosed with leukemia. He's actually now cancer-free. So completed all his treatments. So awesome. Extremely good news for the young man, Mechie, and extremely good news for the Texans. He's expected to be back and playing football this year in 2023, which is fantastic on all accounts. Gets them, basically, a free roll of, we have another guy just coming in who wasn't there last year. So this is great news for them.
I'm cheering for John Mechie. That story is amazing. I don't know if John Mechie is as good as people are talking. Like when you watched him at Bama, did you ever look at that guy and think anything besides like a high-end wideout 3 in the NFL level?
I thought he could be, and then he tore his ACL, and I have questions about it. I actually thought he could be playing off the number one. I never thought he could be that first option, but I thought he could be the number 2 for sure in the NFL.
I don't know if I see it. I mean, I'm cheering for him. I hope that John Mechie comes out and breaks records, but it's just since the injury, man, it's slow.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see how he recovers there. And then, I mean, the rest of the way, I kind of put a bow on this thing unless you have something else. Like I think the Texans need to do what the Panthers did a few years ago in the draft. Just fucking draft defensive guys. Let DeMeco Ryans see who can play on this team and do what the Panthers did, where they're good on D. The Niners are good on D. And then it's all about plugging in place and the offensive side of the football. That's what I think the Texans should do.
I think that one thing that's underrated at this point in draft season is I think the hype around Caleb Williams in NFL circles is probably even higher than it is on Twitter. I think even these guys are like planning, and they're 3-year windows in the NFL. You don't operate like the Bears aren't looking at this pick and going, well, if we nail this, we're going to win the Super Bowl, right? They're trying to
Right.
build the 2025. And if the Texans are looking at it that way, then you could very easily see them maybe shocking the world.
Maybe they trade down at a 2 spot.
It'd have to be like Oakland or Carolina.
It'd have to be, I'd be shocked if they trade that, but just
Carolina's
just
we'll talk about that. I'll save that. I'll save the Carolina.
Arizona Cardinals are the 3rd pick in this year's draft after a 4-13 record the previous season. $13.8 million in cap space available at the present moment. That's the 12th most available. So middling kind of situation there. JJ Watt retires, AJ Green retires. So, some of those contracts will get off the books. I know JJ Watt was an expected free agent, but he's done anyway. Jonathan Gannon, old defensive coordinator from the Eagles, will be taking over, first-year head coach. Kyler Murray is their quarterback. He tore his ACL late in the season. I don't know how much he's going to play this year, so there's question marks about who's going to be the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals in the 2023 season. Their draft picks include the 3rd overall pick, the 35th, and the 67th for their high picks. Team needs offensive line for sure, wide receiver, I think, cornerback, I think. That secondary, which was good and young, is starting to get a little hurt, and I think this is the reason why. Byron Murphy, their star cornerback, notable free agent. I would be shocked if he doesn't get franchise tagged, to be completely honest, if they can't work out a deal. And then they have Kevin Beachum, offensive tackle, who's a free agent. Rodney Hudson, the center, who's a free agent, who used to be a really good center and has fallen off a bit. Well, there's a lot of discuss throughout the Cardinals. First, Kyler Murray, we don't know if he's coming back. This feels like this is going to be another gap year. See who can play in that franchise. Who's even good? Let's take a look at what Jonathan Gannon sees.
Who gives a
next
shit?
Year we'll get somebody.
I think who gives a shit is an important factor with the Arizona Cardinals because it doesn't look like there's a ton. Well, one need you didn't shout out there, and I think kind of a pressing one for the Cardinals, like they need edge rushers. And luckily this draft has a handful of them. I think it's like probably a little bit too early to be talking Peter Skoronski or Broderick Jones or Paris Johnson or Jackson or whoever.
I agree.
To play. This isn't like a Lane Johnson or somebody like that, tackles of the past that kind of walk in and they're going top 3 or top 4 the second they show up. To me, and this is what the most interesting thing that I've seen so far is Daniel Jeremiah actually released the second version of his mock draft, and he has Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher from Texas Tech. Daniel Jeremiah's plugged in. And so if he's getting smoke at 3, I think there's some money to be made on his draft position when it comes time. I personally, like, I've seen Will Anderson play so many times and just watch this dude. And like when he's on, he looks like, he could be Lawrence Taylor someday. Like that's the way this guy looks. And that's high praise, but that's how people are talking about him. Go back to his freshman year and listen to Gary Danielson get on his knees for 4.5 hours. I mean, that's what this was. Got to be edge rusher. I just think like JJ Watt's out the door. Chandler Jones is gone. Gannon's defense works a heck of a lot better when you don't have to blitz a passer. It's much better when you can generate that pressure with the front 4. It's too early probably to go Witherspoon or somebody or Gonzalez, maybe at corner, guys like that. So I think edge rusher is the play, but don't be surprised if Arizona's fielding calls to move back.
Yeah, good point. Very good point, because maybe they like Skoronski, the offensive tackle from Northwestern. Now, Daniel Jeremiah has him as a 7th-rated prospect overall, and we'll see what happens after the combine, when we get a little bit more idea on how tall these guys actually are, what their length of their arms are, all that stuff, athlete, things like that. I think if the Cardinals stay pat at 3, I think they draft Will Anderson. That feels like a no-brainer for me. Like, where there's so many question marks surrounding this front office and the decisions they've made, to them being out, taking a year off, whatever the case may be, we have no clue what actually was going on between the ownership and then the previous front office regime. So now you have kind of a new thing coming in. Gannon, we need an edge rusher. I think they would be fucking crazy if they take Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech when Will Anderson's on the board. Because if Will Anderson's not good, we can all be like, man, Will Anderson, we all collectively missed on him.
Everybody missed.
But if Will Anderson's good and you take Tyree Hunter, you are the biggest, or Tyree Wilson, I'm sorry, you are the biggest clown. Like clown organization, right? People are like, you're an idiot. Like we watch this guy, Alabama. Like you got a front row seat on CBS every week. And to me, if you're staying at 3 and they're like, we need a guy, just fucking take Will Anderson. Like, don't galaxy brain this. Like, I don't care if he's a tenth of a second slower in the 40. I don't care if he has 2 shorter inches of length in his arms. Don't be an idiot. Just take Will Anderson.
So you're saying they're going to end up with Lucas Van Ness then?
They're gonna take Devin Witherspoon, the cornerback, and be like, yeah, this is our guy now.
I mean, but that does speak to the draft a little bit. Like when you look back at these things 5-10 years down the line, you can go through and you can go miss. And very rare that everybody is like, okay, that guy's going to be a monster. Like even with like Jadeveon Clowney coming out, like the highest rated guy that I can remember, there were people that were like, dude, he doesn't try. And you
Right.
don't get those same sentiments about Will Anderson. People will question his motor sometimes, but you know what, dude? If I'm up 46 points against Southeast Missouri, I don't know if I'm hating on him for that, or if we're beating Auburn by 3 touchdowns, I want to talk my shit. I don't know if I need to get to the quarterback here. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the rest of the way, though, if you're the Cardinals, I think they're in a good spot to draft some young wide receivers. Like you said, getting
Hollywood's coming back.
Hollywood's back now. AJ Green's retired. He didn't do much. Now DeAndre Hopkins, he wants out. Like he's done with it. They're kind of done with him. I think this is a good spot for them to take some younger guys in this draft, to wait till Murray comes back, whether it is this late this season or next season. And you just got better options there. I wouldn't be shocked if they take a tight end at 35, or if they move back from 3. I wouldn't be shocked if they take a Dalton Kincaid or Darnell Washington, Michael Mayer. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they go that route either and just get a reliable tight end because Kyler Murray does like him. But I think you got to get some dudes in this offense. Like it just feels like there just wasn't enough guys. And then maybe if they do want to build an offensive line, I think it seems a little bit more top heavy, but there's always some gems late in the middle rounds that they could be targeting as well.
And I think organizational shift needs to be like looking around the building and realizing how many of these athletic freaks you've taken over the last couple of years, and the fact that like one of them can play.
Yeah.
You got to look around the scouting room at some point and be like, dude, do you have anything for me besides these testing numbers?
And that's Tyree Hunter. Like that's fucking, or Tyree Wilson. I'm saying Tyrese Hunter, like the basketball player. Like it's in my head.
It's that time of year, dude. We're inundated with names, and like the amount of first names that a lot of these guys share, and then we're like getting it thrown into our face from every direction. It can be tough.
So Tyree Wilson. Now he's the athletic freak that feels like the Cardinals are like drooling over, right? Like that's probably why Jeremiah has a mock there. He's like, I know these clowns. They love this type of guy.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Isaiah Simmons and
your boy
Zaven Collins, and there was one more in there too, I think, but it'll come to me.
It'll definitely come to you. All right, anything else on the Cardinals you want to mention before we move on?
I think they're in huge trouble, dude. I think the Arizona Cardinals are in massive, massive danger. It's like, to me, you're stuck with Kyler Murray for at least 3 years until you can get some money off that contract. I don't know. Like, I think Jonathan Gannon is going to be a good head coach, but I don't think he's like a ceiling raiser to the point that this is going to be a playoff team all of a sudden. Like, they truly didn't care a year ago, and a lot of those guys are still in the building.
Indianapolis Colts, another team. Both of us think they're in trouble just in terms of what they've been doing and how they've missed a window. Last year, extremely disappointing. And there were huge expectations on this team. 4-12-1 is the record they finished with, which is just unfathomable to think about. Fired Frank Reich, brought in Jeff Saturday out of the ESPN lot. Then now, obviously, that didn't work out. They hired Shane Steichen. Now, it's a good first step. I think you and I both like him. Very forward-thinking guy, especially on the offensive side of the football. They have $12.2 million in cap space right now. That's the 15th most available. Now, quarterback, Matt Ryan technically still has a contract. March 17th, 2023. So in about 2.5 weeks. Oh, gosh, $12 million is guaranteed. And that's going to become a roster bonus. He's not cut by then. That is of more than $7 million. So basically, they're going to have to pay $19 million. 12 of it's already guaranteed. So I don't think that counts to the cap, right? Because it's already
I think
guaranteed
if
money.
you cut him now, then you owe that 12. But if you keep
You
him,
owe him
then
the
you owe
12.
19.
Then you owe him 19. Okay.
But this better become a Bobby Bonilla situation. Like you gotta kick this can as far as you can down the road.
God, man. Oh, what a disaster.
Who could
that
have
was for the
predicted that
Colts.
wasn't going to work, huh?
I think you did, didn't you?
I think everybody in the world looked at that and was like, "What the hell?"
No, everybody was on it. Remember, because it's not Carson Wentz. Not Carson Wentz. It
God.
was like, yeah, but Matt Ryan stinks.
Yeah, I mean, poor Matty Ice too. I was talking about that the other day. Like, if you just go resume for resume with pretty much anybody from the last 10 years, like Matt Ryan comes up short only a couple times. But you throw the name on it, and then it's like, dude, I didn't want Matt Ryan over him.
Yeah, I know. Draft picks, 4th overall, 35th, and 79th. Ugh, God, that draft capital is just not great. Team needs quarterback, edge rusher, wide receiver, offensive line. If there's some other additions you want to make there. And the notable free agents, Yannick Ngakoue, linebacker Bobby Okereke, offensive guard Matt Pryor, linebacker EJ Speed, and wide receiver Paris Campbell. So, I mean, there's some names there, man. I think they got to start rebuilding this thing. What's your first thought on the Indianapolis Colts?
I struggle with this one a little bit. I think they need to do less work than the other guys who need quarterbacks as far as like total roster construction on the offensive side of the football, at least. Like Alec Pierce can play a little bit, and Michael Pittman Jr. can play. So to me, like it has to be quarterback. You have to change this ridiculous approach of getting everybody else's used goods, basically paying top dollar for those used goods, and then finding out that they stink. Like they can't go, bridge Gardner Minshew here, and we all talk ourselves into it.
God, dude.
I really trust Shane Steichen to get the guy that he likes. Like I think Irsay has dropped enough tea leaves for us at this point to know that if there's a guy they want number one, they're going up to go get that guy. I think that Shane Steichen's probably going to fall in love with Bryce Young. That's just my gut feeling. If they have to stay at 4, I think you're probably hoping for CJ Stroud over the other guys. I think his processing speed and kind of the offense that he played in, I think Shane Steichen will like. But dude, it's tough because this isn't like there's never a surefire thing in the NFL. But with a lot of these number one quarterbacks, like if you didn't think Trevor Lawrence was at least going to be average, you were lying, right? In the NFL. If you didn't think some of these top generational guys that we get every year, if you thought Andrew Luck was going to stink, you were lying. Like we normally know. We don't know this year because the number one guy is 5'10", 185 pounds. CJ Stroud, it's like no Ohio State quarterback's ever made it work, disregarding the fact he throws the ball completely differently, in my opinion, than some of the last couple guys that come out of there. Anthony Richardson, huge project. Will Levis seems like a huge project. They're in a tough spot, dude. And if you love somebody, you have to go up to 1 to go get them because this thing has to end. Like, I don't care if they only make 1 pick in the first 2 rounds. You got to get the quarterback position right.
Yeah, and then just kick, like you said, kick everything else down the road. Like if you have to say, hey, we're going to suck for a few more years, that's fine if you have your guy. But they, as an organization, Chris Ballard as the head of the front office, made a decision. This roster's ready right now. We're going to, like you said, take the used goods. Because honestly, they were not prepared for the Andrew Luck retirement. They had no backup plan.
But it's hard to blame them for that too. Like you should have probably had a better second string quarterback in the building. That era's Teddy Bridgewater maybe. But it's like you can't go from Peyton to Luck to Josh Allen.
No, but here's what I'm saying. I'm blaming him for this. The first season, fine. Andrew Luck's retiring.
Yeah.
Why the fuck are you saying let's get Rivers? Oh, that didn't work. Let's get Wentz. Oh, true. You know what? That's let's double down a third time because that's a great idea. Let's get Matt Ryan. It's like, dude, now I can start to push some blame. Draft, and if in the entire time they're not drafting quarterbacks, like they draft Sam Ehlinger, and then that was like, yo, we're pretty good on Ehlinger. It's like keep drafting quarterback. Like that's where I had an issue with Ballard.
I don't really understand everyone in the world is talking like the Colts are going to get this right. And I think Shane Steichen is going to, if he has any say, I trust his opinion. like this guy's been around really good quarterbacks the last couple of years.
Yep,
Like,
Herbert.
yeah, and I don't know
Went,
if anybody else heard, but Justin Herbert
Wilson.
wasn't a very popular pick at the time either.
Right.
When he goes 6, so I trust Steichen to be able to evaluate these guys, but that's not foolproof. Like that can backfire right in your face. I mean, how many guys on the Jets have lost their job in the last couple of years because they were pounding the table for Zach Wilson
Right.
over some of these other guys? To me, dude, like Jonathan Taylor's prime will be wasted. Like, there's no way this dude's going to play as presently constructed. There's no way this dude's playing deep playoff football at any point in Indianapolis. And then you got Shaq Leonard, who didn't play a year ago, hardly at all. Huge contract on the Bucks. Quentin Nelson, your generational guy walking right in the Hall of Fame, looked pretty mortal a year ago.
Dude, not good last year.
A lot of those guys. I think there'll be some regression to the mean because there still are good offensive linemen that they have. Like they're still good players. You got to stay healthy, which is luck basically, and then you got to just kind of hope that water finds its level. So I think they're going to bank on that. But like if they get this wrong, I mean, Indianapolis, this could be a long. This could be Cleveland Browns-esque. Like that's
Like,
how bad I think this could end up.
100%, especially when you look at the Jaguars seemingly have their guy in Lawrence, like especially paired with Doug Peterson. If the Texans get it right, I who knows? I mean, really, because it's the Texans. But let's say they have their quarterback, the Colts don't have theirs. Then you have the Titans with fucking Vrabel, who's an incredible coach. Like they're basically the Steelers, man. It doesn't matter; they just win. You're looking at a bottom-feeding Indianapolis team for the next decade if they can't figure out this quarterback position. Because, like you said, they're starting to age. They're expensive, and they went 4-12-1 last year because they had one position that was off, and that was the quarterback position. So,
and dude, look around the AFC. Look at the top quarterbacks in the NFL, and see how many fingers you get on your hand before you get to the NFC. For like the best total quarterbacks in the game, like this is where they're at. This is where this is where they're going to be for a decade because all these guys are 27.
Maybe they should just suck for a decade, and hopefully that some kid in middle school is actually the answer.
Arch Manning, they can just wait 3 years.
But the problem is Burrow's going to be like 28. Like he's still got like 10 more years.
Then you're in trouble. I mean, like this is why they're picking in the top 4. That's the same thing that goes for all these teams. Next draft dive, we kind of get a little bit different with the Seahawks at 5. You got the Eagles at 10. So there's good teams sprinkled throughout here. But these top 4, man, like we're going to be saying question mark stuff a lot less as we move through this.
Yeah, and we'll kind of update our thoughts, as we get closer and closer to draft. We'll have more information. We'll have a better idea on these prospects. We're going to have something where we go through. I only really have like 3 positions I truly know how to evaluate and like to evaluate. Like I can't evaluate an offensive line. I can't really evaluate defensive line. But I love evaluating quarterback, wide receiver, and corner. So, Tyson, I know you have some that you like. I know we overlap a lot. So we're going to do a bunch of diving in on stuff like that, building out our own big boards and different things. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun for us to do. But I'm excited, man. Draft dive, our first one. How'd you feel? Do you think any of these teams have a chance to go kind of what the Jags did last year?
I don't know. I mean, the one to me that could do it would be you'd want to say Indianapolis, but like I don't think that's true. I don't know if any of these guys could do it personally. I mean, if I was going to go anywhere, I'm going with whoever gets Bryce Young. I don't even know if he's the best quarterback in the class, but I think he's the best leader and player right now. But I mean, this is where you make money on the NFL draft. You have to be in it now to know what's going to happen in April. And before we get out of here, I just wanted to point out to everybody that when the running backs run the 40 on Sunday, please pay attention because Israel Abanikanda is going to run a 4.3. Devon A-Chain is probably going to run the 4.2s. And you know who's up next? Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, I was going to say the Auburn kid. We talked about this, right?
He's gonna run a 4.55, and everybody in the world watching that thing is going to think he is in molasses. I feel so bad for him.
But he's going to get drafted higher, right? Like people like him.
I mean, he's a good player. Yeah, it's just like when
They're
Etienne
like,
runs
oof.
when he runs a 4.25 or 4.29 or whatever, I mean, this is a guy that was like he's like Olympic level track athlete
Yeah,
almost.
didn't he go to like the Junior Olympics or like
Yes, like he
U17 or something?
is that graph or the video that everyone shows of Tyreek running around the track. Like that's A-Chain, but that's doing it against Olympic sprinters. Like I think he's going to run super fast, and then like he's going to get moved up boards, and I think he's a good player. But it's going to push guys like watch on Sunday is all I'm saying because Sean Tucker's putting on a show, Abanikana's putting on a show, A-Chain's putting on a show. Bijan might have the fastest 10-yard split in the history of the combine for running backs. Like this dude moves, and the fact he's even competing to me shows like this dude's a dog. Because like Jackson Smith and Jigba's not running the 40. Come on,
Right.
brother. Bryce Young
That's
doesn't
crazy.
want to do any drills.
I
Come
don't
on,
blame him for
brother.
that. He's got a shoulder injury, man.
I understand all that, but it's at a certain point, it's like I want the dude who wants to compete, even though he knows.
He has a shoulder injury, but then 2 weeks later he'll throw out Alabama Pro Day.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's going to do it. We appreciate you all listening. Draft Dive Part 1. We got more next week. We'll do another one next week, so pay attention to that. We also have some basketball to discuss, Tyson. I think there's conference championship games or something, or conference tournaments, and then we got March Madness. Isn't that so popular? Like a popular thing, right?
I mean, I'm waiting to hop off this so I can check that Alabama-Auburn score in the SEC tournament. Auburn was up at half, so I got to check that out. But if you want our bets and stuff for these college tournaments, join our chalkboard. It's in the App Store, and it'll be in Google Play, all of them. The group name is The Roundtable. We have picks on the Arnold Palmer this weekend in the PGA. Yes. We have John Jones returning to the UFC for the first time in a 4-year stretch. And that card's loaded, dude. There's a ton of hype trains. There's so many undefeated fighters. People are going to lose their shit. And like we got these conference
fighting, right? Bo Nickel
minus 2,000.
Yeah, let's go
on the books right now. It's going to be a good betting weekend. So get in there. The group name is The Roundtable. The app is Chalkboard. And tail us, fade us, doesn't matter. Just engage.
Subscribe to the show. Thank you for listening. Contact us on social media. Give us a follow. Instagram's @_the roundtable pod _ our TikTok handle is the same. And you can send us a tweet over at TRT_pod. Like I said, we'll be back next week talking college basketball, getting ready for the tournament, and then a second edition of the Draft Dive coming at you as well. We'll speak to you all then. Peace.